Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Emily here, and I am just so excited about today's video for a couple reasons. One, it's my very first time doing any no-line watercoloring, and I broke down and got a Misty, and I absolutely love it. So I'm using that here, and my Gina K Sandy Beach ink, and I will stamp that down on some Carson XL watercolor paper, and I am using that stamp set by Gina K. It's a Theresa Momber Vertical Greetings 2 stamp set. And then I just stamped that down one time. I got a good enough impression that I can see it well enough. And I've got my little basket of brushes here, and I'm just using a Royal Langnickle, I believe it's a number 1 brush. And I've got some water in my little, as you can see, Animal Planet collapsible bowl right there. I just found it at Tuesday morning, and it works perfectly for my watercoloring. And then this watercolor set that my husband got for me for my birthday recently, and I've wanted it for a while, and I absolutely love it. So I am using this brush to lay down some water and a few of the petals that are not touching, and coming in with that first color, which is the C05, and then I use C06 for my darker shade in there to get a little bit of a variation between the colors. And I will just work it nice and slow since it's my first time to get as good of a blend as possible and try to get that contrast needed for the no-line watercoloring. So I sped up the video a little bit more here than I usually do so that it goes a little bit faster. It's still closer to 11 minutes, but I didn't want to cut out any of the watercoloring because I felt like that was the majority of this card. Actually it was, so I didn't want to cut any of that out. But then for this green shade I am using C22. It's kind of a lime type green, it looks like. And it's a really pretty color, so I put that down so that it could dry before I come in with the next color so they wouldn't bleed into each other. And then when I finish putting the green down, I come in with some more of that yellow and orange shade and blend on a couple other petals next to the other ones that have had a minute to dry, and do that same shading and blending. And then these brushes that I'm using, I get them from Walmart, so they're not really expensive brushes. I'm not really great at watercolor, and until I get better I don't really want to invest in a nice set of brushes until I know for a fact that I will be doing it enough to make it worth it. So for now these work for me, but I was quite impressed with how this one turned out. I actually really loved it, so I might just be headed in the watercolor direction, we'll see. And in a few of my videos I've mentioned that my husband and I are building a house out where we live in Idaho, and we have just finished, mostly finished our septic system. We had 200 feet of drain field that we needed to level out and put some rock into. We had about 69 ton of rock that we were supposed to put in there, or about 6 inches of it, and then the drain pipes, and then the rest of the rock on top. And we decided we were going to try and shovel that in, and then after one weekend of trying to shovel the rock into the drain fields, 200 feet worth, we decided it wasn't worth the time and the back pain and the stress of it, so we rented a skid steer and then finished that easily in an 8-hour day. So that was very nice to get that finished and a lot less stressful there. And now we're just getting ready to start on our foundation, putting the plumbing stubbed in for that slab, and then put the rock down to have the concrete poured. So we're pretty excited about getting our house up, or starting the wall raising here soon. Oh, and then for that other green shade that I used down there, I used C25, and I mixed it with some of that C22. The C25 by itself was just a little bit too olivey. It was a little bit darker and didn't quite fit with that other green so well, so I blended them together and it got a better blend, or a better shade to go along with that first color that I put down. That leaf on the far left, you can see, doesn't look super pretty, but I didn't want to start the whole thing over, so I just kind of covered it up as best I could with that little mixture that I did of those two colors. And it turned out fine in the end, but now I know not to blend those two colors together by themselves because it just doesn't look that great. So here I'm just trying to darken up the, I guess, the points where the leaves connect, where it would have the most shade and shadows. So I'm just using some of that same mixture that I did of that C25 and C22 to try to achieve that look. And it wasn't quite dark enough in some of the areas, so I also did bring in a C40 and then the C43 black to try to darken that up even more at those joining points down there at the bottom. You can see my daughter here, she kept asking what this set was, and anyway, I think it's cute when their little hands pop in. But yeah, you can see it's just not looking very dimensional, I guess, down there at the bottom, so that's when I decided to bring in that brown and the black to try to bring in more shadow. So here's that brown, and I just did a very, very thin line of it right next to where it would touch the next portion of the leaves or stems. And then I blended it out, so it's a very tiny amount, so you can't even tell that it's brown. And then I'm bringing in another shade, actually, which is the C38. That's another yellow shade. It's a little bit darker than that first one, and I'm using that to create more of that depth and dimension from on the flowers. And then here I've even brought in a darker shade of orange. It's the shade C08. And that was just to try to bring in more of that depth. And I think all in all, it probably took me 45 minutes to watercolor this flower, which I don't think was too bad, especially for my first time with no-line watercoloring, but maybe I'll get quicker, we'll see. So then here's that darker shade of orange again. And where those two petals meet up on the bottom right hand side of that flower facing a different direction, they kind of blended into each other. You can see that kind of lose that, the dimension, I guess, the contrast that there should be there from adding those two because they are touching. And anyway, so I brought in a red shade to add just a tiny bit of it there. And that gives it just that little bit extra that it needs to separate those two petals. And I honestly can't remember if it was the C09 or the C13 that I used. But regardless, I used a red shade there, just a tiny bit of it. So there you could see how that looked. And when I finished that, I've got a die set here, or die from Bo Bunny Fancy Frame dies. I'm using the largest one to die cut that out. And I did lose some of the footage here more towards the end, but I'll just kind of walk you through what I did and what I used. So here you can see that, and I love that shape with that flower. I thought it turned out so nice. And then I've got a piece of my Kraft Cardstock Warehouse Speckletone Kraft Cardstock. That's what it is. And I've got my Just Stitching and double rectangle dies by Fawn. And I am using the second largest die in that set. And I wanted this to be on a white card base, so I cut off 1/4 inch off the side and off the top of this panel. And after I get that cut off, then I tape that stitching die down in place with some purple tape and run that through my machine as well. And then you can see that stitching detail that gave there. Here I'm using the Altenew Label Love stamp set and that Hello die, or the Hello sentiment, sorry, and the Gina K black onyx ink. And these are kind of finicky and are a little bit harder to get stamped just the way that you want them to, so I inked it up lightly and stamped it twice with very light pressure to get the result that I wanted, and it turned out okay. And then I'm using my tonic guillotine paper trimmer here to trim out that label with just a tiny white border around the edge of that, so that it would kind of match the card having that little white border. And then after that, I place some regular dot adhesive, or sorry, tape runner. I like the Adtech, the permanent one. It's a pretty strong adhesive, and I placed that on the back of that Kraft panel, and then placed that onto my card base. And then I added some Scotch 3M foam tape to the back of that die cut flower panel, and then popped that up in the center, and then a little bit of foam tape on the back of that hello sentiment, and placed that on the bottom right hand corner of that die cut as well. And that finishes the card, and here you can see it in the picture, and I love how it turned out. It just makes me so excited to try more no-line watercoloring with that watercolor set, and I hope you loved it too, and I will be back soon. Thank you so much. Bye.